CoastFI Couple, podcast where love meets financial independence. I'm Matt.
And I'm Yana. Join us every other week as we dive into the world of CoastFI and share smart money tips for couples.
We're going to be talking all about how to strengthen your bond and your relationship and bring you closer to financial independence.
One episode at a time. All right.
Welcome back.
Episode 6.
Episode 6 of CoastFI Couple.
Yep, in the studio.
In the studio again. Really glad to be back. Always love coming to the studio.
Yeah, I know you do.
I do. Nerd out a little bit about it. All right, so what are we covering today on episode 6?
Oh, this one is a fun one. I think that we are going to be naming this episode something like Burnout and the Boring Middle.
Burnout and the Boring Middle is what we coined it. But yes, this is going to be an important episode.
Yes.
It's one that we knew we were going to record back when we thought of starting the show, because there's just not enough information out there, at least from what I found, about what happens to people who push too hard, too fast, and don't stop and rest. And we'll go into it today because this was a real eye-opening situation for me. You were right there along the journey. And,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that, your burnout was really one of the main reasons that we became more motivated to explore Coast in a realistic way.
Totally agree. I think before we get into this, I want to just put a quick disclaimer out there, right? Like, we are in no way, shape, or form medical advisors or have any experience in the medical field.
Do not have my doctorate.
Do not have a doctorate. So we're not healthcare providers. And for those of you listening who have similar experiences or maybe similar symptoms that we'll talk about on the show, just recommend you seek someone out who knows what the heck they're talking about. I will say this episode is purely from our experience and our point of view. And with that, let's talk about it.
Yeah, you want to talk about it. So a few years ago, I think work just started getting a lot harder for you.
We were talking about this last night.
Yes.
So I think some background. I was a young dad, right? So right from the get-go, I was 21 when I found out I was going to be a dad, and I jumped into the workforce as soon as I could to trying to start to provide. And I think I just pushed as much to the working as I could, if it makes sense. I mean, I'm actually feeling nervous talking about this.
I know. Really I see you feeling.
I can feel it being difficult.
So when we were talking about this, it was last night or a couple nights ago, I think that there was a little bit of a revelation that you had because I'd sort of pointed out that, you went from being a 20-year-old kid to a 21-year-old dad, and you had just kind of started getting this financial bug. You were already listening to Dave Ramsey. You were already...
That's true.
I'm correct about that, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so your mind shift from building as an individual then immediately became having to be a provider for a family. And I think that immediate shift at such a young age, with the knowledge that you knew of financial independence and financial peace and just, having to get all of your ducks in a row financially, you didn't have time to mess around. You didn't have time to think short term. You didn't have time you had to think long term. And that go, have to get it done, have to provide, have to kind of chase the dollar, I think really fed your motivation in a positive way because it helped you get to where you are. It helped eventually us get to where we are. And here's one of our great metaphors, which I think is one of your metaphors that you brought to the table a few months ago was you're running. And oftentimes, like when a runner stops, they vomit. So
they collapse
and they vomit.
That's a really good analogy.
And I think that you were just running. You were just getting as much done as you could as quickly as possible. And you weren't really connecting to your feelings of burnout at any point really along the way. You were just, again, very head down.
I think you're absolutely right. When I started out, after I graduated high school, I was teaching swim lessons to kids around town, and I was listening to Dave Ramsey on those commutes back in between swimming pools, And so I had known even back then how important this was, and I needed to save as much as I could and make sure that we didn't, go into debt. And so when I started to become a dad and those expenses started to creep up and the responsibilities were kind of more, I think I was already nervous that I was having to stop investing. I remember the day that I had to stop investing in my Roth IRA, and I knew what that meant for our path. And that was really painful because I just wasn't making enough to be able to contribute to that and take care of the medical bills of the kiddo, and so that was hard. It was a hard day, and I remember thinking this is going to set me back 20 years or something. But it was the stress of like, okay, find a job that makes money as fast as you can and head down and grind. Right.
Yeah.
So that was like the beginning. Right. And I was fine mostly for that. Like, I think we talked on earlier episodes, like I've never really found a job that, it filled my bucket with more energy. Right. Like I get excited about projects and I do love parts of my career and I can get excited about that stuff because medicine is really fascinating, but it's really stressful too. And so during the climb, I think I was about 8 years in when I experienced my first panic attack, which was, I had no idea what to make of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was hard. It was
a scary time.
Scary time.
I think the first panic attack that you had at work, it was at work.
It was at work.
Was it in the bathroom at work?
No, it was after 10 o'clock at night, at the office. No one else was around.
Okay.
I had a couple big presentations and projects that I was trying to wrap up. And I remember sitting at the desk and the lights in the hallway were going off. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to finish this in time. And then I started like almost hyperventilating a little bit. I got lightheaded. I had to sit down on the ground in the office and just kind of like try and collect my thoughts and realize that I was not feeling safe enough to drive home. And then that lasted another half hour or so before I felt like I could even get in the car.
Was that
crazy?
While you were also in school? You were in school at that time too.
I was in school. Yeah.
Matt had gone back to get his master's around this time because we were trying to push ourselves to this next level in our careers. We were both in school, but you were getting your master's. It was a crazy time.
And we had our second child too. So we had a baby
and we had a toddler.
Ish. Yes.
Yeah.
Young kid.
Yeah. And that I remember that first panic attack. And I thought it was just the company you were working for. I thought, okay, that's it. We got to make a change. And we had already had a plan to make a shift once your master's was done, right? I think that your tuition was partly being reimbursed by that company. So we sort of had a timeline there for how much longer you had to be there. So we were already sort of counting down. And even after that first panic attack, there was still some grind that we went through. I think you were still there for another year?
I remember at the time I went to grad school, I didn't think I was going to leave the company right away. I pictured it as like a way to get past the glass ceiling that was up there, right? So the job kind of required an MBA to be able to get to the next level, which is, again, we talked about this before.
You wanted that next pay. We wanted pay structure. Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which also didn't quite pan out. I think they lowballed you.
We'll not get into that.
but which was, it all kind of, a lot of this started to accumulate right around the pandemic. You had graduated with your master's. I think the rug was pulled out from you a little bit at your previous position at that previous company. And so you started shopping around and you were able to make a change and you went to a different company, really great company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was a positive change for both of us. You were able to work from home. You had less travel. And it felt like, okay, maybe this was just that company and it's not the job. And for a little while it was like, okay, maybe this is the change that we needed to make. But you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I had hoped it was the job.
Yeah.
Right. I think what we found out later on is this is exactly what burnout is you push yourself so hard that at some point, I remember how difficult it was not only to get out of bed, but to finish an email was very difficult for me. And that was such a horrible sensation because I was used to the grind. I was used to pushing hard. I was almost feeling pride as a guy to be the one that was the last first in office, last one out. I worked as hard as I possibly could. And then I hit a wall. And that wall was something I couldn't reason around. Mm-hmm. I knew what I had to do. I had the training to do it. I felt like there's no reason for me not to be successful here.
You were working for a great company.
I was working for a great company. I liked what I was doing to some extent. But it progressively got worse and worse. And I couldn't figure out what the hell was happening.
Yeah.
And it was scary, right? Because I couldn't address it. And so I was starting to do research, starting to figure out, okay, maybe I need medication, right? Like what is going on with my brain that I can't
continue to push.
Yeah.
And we tried that route, Matt saw a couple different doctors and we tried a few different medications to try and help you with your stress and your anxiety. But again, it was like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg in a way.
Yeah.
Eventually the truth was he just hit a wall. He had worked so hard for such a long time, head down, that I think you just needed to make a change. And you called me one time on a business trip with the new company that was a good company. And he was having another panic attack. At this point, it was probably like your third or fourth panic attack. So it wasn't...
I've had 3 panic attacks, if I count correctly. Yeah.
I think you've probably had more than that you're not counting, but that's maybe. Okay. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah.
It's definitely been more than 3, but that particular time he called me and he was having a panic attack and I had to calm him down on the phone and it was really stressful. And we had already had a plan for you to step away from this job and for us to enact our Coast plan. And it was still at that time, I think 8 to 10 months out or something. And after that phone call, I knew we had to immediately put it into action.
I remember the time that this happened. I remember the feeling saying, okay, because it took all night for this to pass. And, again, this is an episode that's where I'm trying to be as vulnerable here as I can because it was definitely a lesson learned. And through that night, when the panic attack finally passed, I knew the next morning that, it's time to make a change. And that was both a sad moment as well as it was a reprieve, right? Like I could finally say, okay, I gave it my all, hit my wall. There's nothing more that I can do here. I'm not going to continue climbing because obviously something is going on where this is not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a lot of statistics and recognizing that, panic attacks are precursors to heart attacks in some fashion. And why the heck would we push harder?
We didn't need it. And it took a lot of conversations with Matt for me to get through to him for him to see that we didn't need him to put your body through this.
Yeah.
Anymore. We had saved a comfortable nest egg. We had already reached CoastFI at this point in time. We had already reached it. We just hadn't made any changes with our work.
We reached it, but it was very, very light. And I still felt like on paper, it would make a lot more sense to keep going. And I had this hard time balancing.
Do I stay for that next bonus? Do I stay for that?
Well, the fire community calls this the 1 more year syndrome, where you've got things moving, they're finally moving along, you see progress in your investments, and you might even like your job and want to stay, but you forget what you're giving up, which is the time to do other things that might be more valuable
and your health,
precious to you, and your health and time with your family. And, yeah.
So we moved the CoastFI, well, not CoastFI date, but because we were already CoastFI, but we moved your date to leave your job up by, I think, 6 months or something.
Yeah, I actually wanted to stay another year, I think, at the time. But
I mean, that would have been nice in a way, but it just at that point, it wasn't worth it anymore.
It wasn't worth it. And you were really a big advocate for me in a time that was very difficult. You know, like I didn't want to leave.
No.
I didn't want to leave my job.
You wanted to leave, but I think that you felt like you couldn't put down the responsibility of having the big shovel job. I think that you had embedded so much of being the provider into who you are as a person and as a man, and your sense of self-worth into that. At such an early age, you had embedded your sense of self-worth into being a provider that I think you couldn't put down the job, the big shovel job. I think doing that just felt like the antithesis of you and who you are and what you're here to do. And you're here to provide and take care of your family and get it done anyway, and bite down on it and just grit through it. And
yeah, plus we had spent all that time and effort, finishing grad school and finally getting to a position where we were, really happy with our savings rate. So it just felt like we finally made it, but we're sacrificing all that effort that we put in to get here. So it was a hard decision, but
it was the right decision.
It was absolutely the right decision.
Totally the right decision. I'm glad we did it when we did. I'm glad we didn't wait. And one thing I was going to ask you when I was thinking about this episode is if you knew then what you know now, or if you were able to have a little bit of a peephole into the deconstruction that you've been through, right? Do you think that you would have left sooner? Do you think you would have done something differently? Do you think that you would have taken more breaks along the way? Because you were also not really one to take PTO.
No,
a whole lot.
I always had PTO at the end of the year, thinking I was going to need it throughout the year. But
the more that Jan and I simplify and automate our finances, the happier we became. And this is the single greatest finance budgeting tool that's come out in recent times. It's called Cube Money, and it's changing the way couples implement financial health. We're investors in this company. We have exclusively been using Cube Money to do our own personal budgets since 2020. And it's so simple that even our kids are now using it. Cube has developed and patented a technology they call Default Zero. And it requires a category to be opened from your personal budget before you can spend with the card. And then once you spend, it deducts it all in real time. This single feature has made Cube the safest card in the world to use. If you drop it, it always has a zero balance on it unless you open the budgeting app. It's been extremely handy for us, and it saved us actually several instances of fraud, and we're never going to go back. Cube is perfect for families too, because they've got shared spending categories that allow you to spend in real time from them, and everyone else in the family can see the updated balance. It's essentially making it 100% foolproof to always stick to our budget, and that has actually been the case. We have not overspent from our budget since we started Cube, and it's amazing. This is the tool that helped us get a handle on our family spending and made our journey to CoastFI so much easier. So if you're ready to take your budget to the next level where you truly can automate it, you truly set it and forget it, then you're in luck, because Cube Money is offering an exclusive deal just for our listeners. Go to cubemoney.com, that's QUBE money.com, and at checkout, use the code COAST. You can try the premium or the family membership for free. And again, we highly recommend it. It's a personal endorsement. We know that if you use the program, it'll work for you. Enjoy.
If I'd known what I know now, then I would have made different changes for sure. I would have left my first company faster. I would have taken my foot off the gas a little bit earlier. I wouldn't have tried to climb the ladder as hard. Right. So
Yeah.
there definitely would have been smart changes. 'Cause I do think that, not that something in me is broken, but I do think that there, even now, is a path to heal that I'm still working through.
Yeah. The deconstruction that I've watched you go through since leaving this job has been really amazing.
Yeah. It's not been and this is something I want people to understand. When you hit this wall, as hard as I did, it's not like you leave your job and the next day you're going to be fine. No, I had months of anxiety after leaving my work, which was just not what I expected.
You had some guilt and some shame that you were kind of working through too, which was somewhat unexpected. I think we both thought that you would leave your job and then it's like, poof, all better. That's, and in a way that was the main conduit of stress. Sure. It was compounding everything, but there was, I think your body was just so used to being this state of anxiety that you needed the time away to not be constantly triggered by that anxiety. I mean, there was this one point, it was, 2 months after you left your job that you were sitting down to write an email for something and you started having the
Signs.
Feelings and you were explaining, you were like, oh, I just had to take a break. I'm having these, like my vision's feeling blurry. I'm getting kind of sweaty. My heart's pounding. And I was like, that is a panic attack. And you're like, no, it's not. Like, yes, that is absolutely a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And we looked it up and we looked at all the signs together. And I think you realized that it had become like a trigger for you, sitting in the desk, your old work desk and sitting down to do the things. And so we had to get a little creative. We kind of redid our desk situation, which I think helped. Taking the time away really helped. And, just really talking through the different projects that you've been working on and things on the side. Like we're focusing more on things that we enjoy doing and building.
Definitely.
And so I think that that's been a good change.
Oh, it absolutely has. And you helped me realize that what we're doing now is we're doing because we want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, you talked about the exact scenario that I think we want to explore a little further, because that triggering of sitting down at the desk to get a task done. I still feel some of it, which is weird, right? Like I've definitely put, one step forward since I've left, and I feel a lot better. Mm-hmm. And the idea of being productive is exciting for me. Like I'm all about trying to be better and iterative improvements over time and efficient. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that a simple task could kind of slow me down was frustrating. It's still frustrating. But once we reformatted this, and I almost want to call you like my personal little therapist, because you helped me realize this. We went on a walk around the neighborhood, and it's like, hey, listen, if money was no object, what would you want to spend your time doing? And damn, if you weren't correct, like I want to spend my time doing this. I want to spend my time talking to other people about the experience that I had, because it's something that I wish I had heard of earlier. I want to spend my time helping people, manage their budgets and get out of the rat race. Mm-hmm. And I want to spend more time with my kids. And what better way of teaching our kids how to get out of the rat race than to provide content like this
and tools
that we've created to help everyone do that. Yeah. So this has definitely been a reframing, right? Like, there are tasks and things that we still do, and that's never going to go away, where it feels like I have to do something that I might not want to do right away. But if I take a moment to step back and realize that I'm doing this because I want to do this, that has helped immensely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me talk a little bit about some statistics about burnout, because for those of who are listening or watching, if you've not experienced the signs yourself, or maybe someone who is experiencing the signs, I think it's just helpful to know how prevalent this is. Mm-hmm. And I think that with the pandemic, not to call that an excuse, but it definitely has opened the door to this being more socially acceptable talking about, because even though a lot of us had the chance to work from home, and that was a great benefit for us, what that also opens the door to is a lot of people have the inability to turn off the switch that is working. Because when you're home, work is right there. And if you're getting the email late at night, it's easy to hop on and take care of it. And so you're never really able to step away unless you put in clear boundaries, which we eventually did.
Yes.
But like me, it took a while to figure that out.
Quick side note before you jump into that. We were recently visiting with some friends over the weekend, and a good friend of ours, she works in HR, and she was explaining how she has 2 cell phones. And we're like, you have 2 cell phones, one for work and one for personal. Like, that just seems like a lot. And she was talking about how she does it very purposefully because it gives her an opportunity to really have the break from work where, you know, instead of picking up one phone in the morning and the first thing you're doing is checking your email, the last thing you're doing is checking your email before you go to bed. Like, she leaves her work phone on her desk and she only uses her personal phone on her personal time. And it really creates that break, and it gives her that healthy boundary between work and personal life. And I've been thinking a lot about that. You know, I thought it was genius. I can't believe I hadn't thought of it before, but that's one way that you can kind of help create that boundary.
So if you remember, I actually had 2 cell phones for a while.
Yeah, you didn't use it like that. You kept them both on you all the time.
I did, because I was trying to be the yes man.
You were grinding. Yeah.
I was grinding, and anytime you're right. I always answer the calls no matter what.
Yeah.
So good point. If there's a clear way for you to leave the phone in another room, and I'm trying to do this more often with my personal phone too. Like when I'm home and when I'm connecting with you or the kids, I don't want my phone on me because it's just too much of an incentive. I get distracted easily. So like I want to remove those obstacles, right? Same thing with like, you know, snacks, right? They say if you have a problem snacking, to leave the snacks, you know, high up in the cupboard far away. So it's almost difficult for you to get to them because naturally humans are lazy and will just go to what's easiest, which would be not the snacks that I desperately want in the top corner.
I do have to hide the snacks from
I'm like a rat with cheese and snacks. All right. So let me get back to some of these statistics because I think they're helpful. So panic attacks specifically, up to 11% of people in the U.S. experience panic attacks each year, which sounds small, but 11% of the whole U.S. is a significant amount.
That's a lot.
So just worth noting. When it comes to burnout, 44% of U.S. employees feel burned out at work, and 45% feel emotionally drained, and 51% feel used up at the end of the day. Those are all very similar in my book, but the fact that roughly half of people in the U.S. feel burned out at the end of the workday or the week, you can only do that for so long before something happens, which a perfect case study on. Like something happened where I couldn't do it anymore, and it's smart to be able to take a step back. That's why people take sabbaticals. That's why people have sick leave. Take the sick leave. Sometimes just a week off or 2 weeks off, if you can manage it, is enough to reset. And it was for me for years. You know, a family vacation was enough. But at some point, if you ignore the signs and you keep pushing hard, something's going to snap. And so you don't want to get to that point.
And one thing, too, that I want to sort of connect back to this point about financial independence and CoastFI, we were able to have Matt walk away from his job 6 months sooner than we had planned to.
Yeah.
Because we had built a comfortable emergency fund. We had a comfortable nest egg. We had the peace of mind to pull that plug probably even 6 months sooner than we actually did it if we really needed to, which knowing that was such a huge relief. We were still super hesitant because it's hard making that change, right? But I think the thing that I want our listeners to know and understand, what is so wonderful about building financial peace and having an emergency fund and building a plan with some of these things in mind, like I might need to take a sabbatical. What if I'm injured and I need to take time off? How can I afford that? Life happens. Yeah. And we were in a position where you could step away from that crazy 9 to 5 job 6 months sooner than we had even planned,
Well, it's because of the good planning that we had the option.
Yeah.
Right. And I think next episode we'll talk about the waterfall of
the order of operations,
for where you, in theory, could put your investments or your time and energy on. So that way, if inevitably something happens to us all, right? We either, get sick, we break something, we feel burnout. And so you want to be in a good position where you're ready to pull the plug or at least put it on hold that you can. Mm. And so, yes, we had prepared correctly. We did the planning that we needed to do. So that way, because I think I mentioned this earlier, the writing was on the wall for me probably long before I even brought it up to you, right? Mm-hmm. Like I was feeling symptoms of burnout long before I mentioned it because I didn't, know what it was. I thought it was just exhaustion and I could work through that typically. So when I finally brought it up and felt comfortable talking about it, because I didn't want to stress you out, right? Like I didn't want to make you nervous because I don't remember if you were already working at the time, so that wasn't a concern. But it was a fact that I was making the big shovel paycheck, and I didn't want to put that at risk or have you stress out about me thinking about leaving my job after all this effort that we went through to try and get there. Was too much to even mention. Mm. And so having our waterfall or our, investments and our savings accounts in place really helped me have that conversation. But again, I think it's important for our listeners, really, really want to stress, like, be as honest as you can with your spouse, right? Because if you can get them on board with how you're feeling, they can offer advice as well, right? Like they can really help us, be a team and know what you're experiencing, because you don't want to be feeling like you're alone. And I didn't feel that way. I had to have a little courage to talk to you about it. But other than that, it was, you've been amazing on this journey. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. I've got last couple points on this podcast. I want to mention is some signs of panic attack, because again, if you've maybe experienced these and you don't know, I had no idea what I was going through. So let's talk a little bit about that, just so that you're aware of it and you can seek your own help. So physical symptoms of a panic attack include heart racing, difficulty breathing, trembling, sweating, chills, nausea, chest pain, stomach pain. All of those things I experienced many times throughout my career. So
doing okay?
Doing okay. Yeah, right. For sure. Doing okay.
Just checking.
I'm putting myself back in the situation to talk about it.
Don't do that. Okay.
And yeah, it is just really, it was really eye-opening. So I'm still thinking about it, and I just don't ever want to get back in that position. And I really do feel like I'm not going to put myself in that position anymore.
No, I won't let you.
You won't let me, but I also won't let
it.
myself anymore, which is really nice. And so mental symptoms, fear of losing control, fear of dying, that for some reason can be an abyss that you go down into and can be very depressing. Behavior, anxious, irrational thinking, heightened sense of vigilance or danger, right? These are all things that I think we've all experienced at some point or another, but if you're starting to have, peaks of those thoughts.
Or multiple of those symptoms all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely worth realizing that you're having those symptoms. Don't shy away from it. Address them. Meditation is something that I've personally never been very good at, but now I'm understanding why people emphasize this and prioritize it.
Yeah.
Because it's understanding your body and what you're going through and talking to yourself and like, okay, what am I feeling today? All right, that's something that is coming up more and more frequently. I'm going to go get checked out. I'm going to go talk to somebody about this or go see somebody. And that's, the first step I think that we don't want to ignore.
One of the interesting things that I learned in therapy was to articulate to yourself how you're feeling. And I think a lot of people think about that phrase like, oh, I feel happy right now, or I feel sad right now, or I feel stressed. Okay, yes, but what they really mean when they say that is, how are you feeling in your body? Because your body holds stress and anxiety and all of these things. You are operating in this, fleshy mechanism, and it goes into these patterns and these systems. And so that's something that I I started implementing, I don't know, not long after Bradley was born, because I started going to therapy and I started, okay, like I have a knot in my stomach about this thing. Why? And trying to deconstruct that. Or I feel really nervous and anxious right now and I don't know why. You hear me say this sometimes where I'll be like, it's just a normal, totally fine day. And I'm like, I just feel really anxious right now. And I don't know why. And I say it out loud because it helps force me to think about why I'm feeling anxious in that moment. But it also gets me an outside perspective in you where you're, because sometimes you see my patterns and I don't even see them, you know, which is really interesting. And I think that that's what I do for you also is I will point out a certain pattern. Like back when Matt was in his super high stress job, Wednesdays was his bad day. It was midweek. He always had a lot of meetings the next day on Thursday. So I just knew that Wednesday was his super stressful day. And sure enough, Wednesdays would come around, he would just be in a bad mood or just be anxious. And sometimes he'd be like, I just don't know why I feel super anxious today. And I'd be like, well, it's Wednesday. So
yeah, you were very good at recognizing the signs. And you've also been very good at normalizing, you know, speaking about how you're feeling, right? Like you just mentioned, I'm feeling like I'm very anxious right now. And you would say that. So then I would recognize the signs even before you say that. So it does. And then now I also tell you like I feel a little anxious on the show right now because
talking about panic attacks,
which is just still something that is just so fascinating to me. So anyway, I think we've talked about this pretty well today. It's, 35 minutes into the episode. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we sign off?
No, just that I think you're doing great.
Well,
keep going.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to not only have you as a partner, but also to have this podcast as a way to show other people this is something that is not something you can sweep under the rug.
Yeah.
Right? Like I really thought that I could overcome it. And the mental obstacle of it was how it directly feeded the way that I physically felt was something I'd never experienced before. So anyway,
having the financial independence was a really great tool for us to be able to step away.
Oh yeah.
But it's important to build your financial independence journey with balance along the way. And I think, getting to this point of CoastFI, we have that balance now, where we can work and do things that we enjoy. I love my job. You're working on things that you're really excited about, and we don't have to super stress ourselves out. But we could have implemented some of those balances into our life sooner and earlier. And so when you're building your financial independence plan with your partner, keep in mind, it's important to take those PTO breaks. It's important to reset. It's important to pivot. If you're feeling super stressed and super anxious, it's time to make a change. And the end goal isn't just having all of the beans in the bowl at 65. You also have to build a journey now with balance. And so I think that's kind of what I want this episode to encapsulate.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really in the beginning. And
no.
So
I think we might have to retitle this episode because this has just been addressing panic attacks. We didn't really even talk about the boring middle.
Oh, true.
So we'll mention
it's just so boring.
We'll mention that in the next episode.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all for listening. It's been very emotionally
draining
this episode, but I think it's important. So we'll catch you next episode, hopefully on something a little more upbeat and exciting. So
thanks. Next time.